My mother-in-law was killed when my husband's assistant ran a red light and hit her, yet somehow the court ruled that she had been trying to scam some money. Still determined to defend her, I filed 3 lawsuits and lost all 3. Just as I was preparing to appeal for the 4th time, I discovered her body had been stolen. I was about to call the police when my husband, Caleb Morgan, a lawyer, showed up and tossed $2,000 onto the table. "You should already know," he said coldly. "I've never lost a case. No matter how much evidence you think you have, your mother's lawsuit will never win. If I said your mom was faking it, she was faking it. All your appeals are just your way of squeezing out more compensation. But don't bother. I already had her body sold on the black market and got $2,000 for it. That's the full value of her life. Stop bothering Belle." That was when it hit me. He thought it was my mother who had died. I pushed the money back toward him. "I don't have the right to take this." He frowned, his voice suddenly sharp. "What? $2,000's not enough for you, Arya? Get this straight. Your mother was unemployed. For someone like her, earning $2,000 with her life is already a miracle. Don't get greedy." I shook my head. "You misunderstand. I mean, you should be the one keeping this money." Caleb's brows knitted tightly, disgust flashing across his face. "Are you out of your mind? This is money from selling your own mother's corpse. What does that have to do with me? Do you really think I'd take that kind of dirty thing?" Caleb grew up with only his mother. His father died early, and it was his mom who worked multiple jobs to raise him and pay for law school, ruining her health in the process. Witnessing all that, he devoted his life to her. I used to wonder why, after his mother's death, he never once went home. Why he dedicated himself completely to defending Belle Carter, the assistant who killed her. Now I knew he thought it was my mother who had died, not his. I looked him straight in the eye and said calmly, "Caleb, I suggest you return that money and buy Mom's body back. Otherwise, you'll regret it." But he only scoffed. "Do you even know what the black market is like? Once something's sold there, you think you can just buy it back? Your mother's body has probably been chopped into pieces by now. There's no getting her back. So just take the money and stop causing trouble." She wasn't my biological mother, but she was still a human being. She'd been killed without reason, branded a scammer, and now her body had been sold off by her own son. The thought of her fate made my chest ache. "Caleb," I said quietly, "since you know exactly how bodies are treated on the black market, how could you still do that to Mom? Doesn't it bother you at all?" He gave a mocking smile. "Why would it? She's your mom, not mine. And besides, the dead don't feel pain. Selling her body for cash at least gave her some worth. She should have watched where she was going. Getting killed was bad enough, but she also traumatized Belle." I stared at him, speechless. I couldn't even imagine how he'd react when he found out the woman sold to the black market was actually his own mother. When I didn't reply, he added casually, "Honestly, I always thought your mom looked like the short-lived type. Even if she hadn't been hit, she wouldn't have lasted long. So just take the money and be grateful. Buy something nice tomorrow to apologize to Belle at the office. End of conversation." After that, he walked away without looking back. As I watched him leave, I suddenly realized something. The man who once fought for justice, the man I admired for his integrity, had completely rotted from the inside out. And this marriage had reached its end. The next day, I drafted the divorce papers and went to his law firm. The moment I stepped into his office, I froze. There he was, the same man who couldn't stand a speck of dust, kneeling on one knee, gently massaging Belle's foot. His eyes were filled with tenderness I had never seen before. When Belle noticed me, she immediately put on her innocent act. "Arya, don't get the wrong idea," she stammered, pulling her foot back. I twisted my ankle and Caleb was just helping me, that's all. Then she tugged at his sleeve, pretending to panic. "Caleb, say something. I don't want to lose my job over this." But Caleb patted her back affectionately, his voice soft. "Don't be afraid. She's just here to apologize." Then his tone turned icy as he looked at me with disgust. "I told you to bring something as a peace offering. Why'd you come empty-handed? You're not young anymore. Don't you even know how to apologize properly?" I didn't bother arguing. Instead, I pulled the divorce papers from my bag, laid them on his desk, and said coldly, "Sign it. We're getting divorced." He blinked, caught off guard. Then his face darkened. "What are you trying to pull now? You know my mom only ever approved of you. She'd never agreed to a divorce. Are you doing this just to make her scold me again?" So he still remembered his mother. I let out a bitter laugh and said quietly, "Your mother can't scold you anymore." His expression shifted. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Go home," I said evenly. "You'll see for yourself." He glared at me impatiently. "Stop confusing me with your nonsense. It's your mom who died, not mine. How long are you going to keep this up? Just leave. You're embarrassing me here. I'm not divorcing you." Just then, Belle, who had been enjoying the show, wiped away non-existent tears and sniffled pitifully. "Arya, I know I bought my driver's license and my driving skills are terrible," she said, her voice trembling. "But that accident really wasn't my fault. You're only filing for divorce now to threaten Caleb into sending me to prison, aren't you?" She looked so fragile that anyone who didn't know better might have believed her, and that included Caleb. He pulled her into his arms protectively and said gently, "Belle, don't cry. As long as I'm here, you'll never go to prison." Then he turned on me, fury burning in his eyes. "Arya, Belle's just a kid. Do you really have to treat her like this? You think waving around a divorce agreement will make me stop defending her? Dream on. Your mother's death was her own fault. You're not getting a single cent in compensation. And if you dare touch a hair on Belle's head, expect the worst." I looked at him, the man who once vowed to stand for truth and justice, now shielding the woman who had killed his own mother. The sorrow I felt was beyond words. But I was done. I took a deep breath and said slowly, each word steady and cold, "This marriage is over." Caleb's face twisted in rage. He grabbed the divorce papers, tore them to shreds, and flung the pieces into the air. "So, you really want to divorce me, huh? Fine, I'll give you what you want, but let me make this clear. If we divorce, I'll write the agreement. I'll make sure you lose everything and walk out of this marriage with nothing but shame. I'll also make sure my mother sees what kind of daughter-in-law she adored. A vile woman who used her own mother's death to scam money and file false lawsuits." Through the flurry of shredded papers floating around us, I caught his cold, vengeful eyes and the small, satisfied smirk curling on Belle's lips. Still, I didn't say a word. I simply turned and walked out of the law firm. Back home, I quietly packed my things. By the time I wheeled my suitcase downstairs, a large group of people suddenly rushed toward me. They surrounded me, holding up cameras and phones, shouting as they recorded, "Look, it's her. The woman who told her elderly mother to fake an accident. After her mom got hit and killed, she used her death to blackmail people for money. When that didn't work, she went to court just to squeeze more cash. She even drove that poor college girl into depression. She tried to take her life several times. Good thing her husband's a righteous lawyer who stood by justice instead of siding with his greedy wife. Otherwise, who knows what that poor girl would have gone through. And now, because he wouldn't help her scam people, she's threatening him with divorce. Look, her bags are packed already." Their accusations pierced through the air like knives. Through the crowd, I saw Belle and Caleb standing at the back, both watching me with smug satisfaction. So, this was his plan, using a live stream to destroy me. And it worked. The reaction was instant. The live streamers were relentless, spitting venom with every word. Soon, my name was plastered all over the internet. What kind of monster uses her own mother's death for money? No wonder her mom died early. Karma got her first. Like mother, like daughter, they both got what they deserved. Serves her right. The car hit the right one. The online outrage spread like wildfire. Within hours, my photos topped every trending list. People called me names. Unfit daughter, scammer, garbage woman. Those labels became who I was. Then the live streamers turned the crowd against me. Spectators hurled rotten vegetables and eggs, shouting insults as I forced my way through the chaos. I stepped over trash and broken shells, walked straight up to Caleb and asked quietly, "Do you really have to go this far, Caleb?" He frowned, but before he could answer, Belle spoke up, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Arya," she whimpered, "I know your mom's gone, but I've been suffering too. Please, just let me go. Stop tormenting me." Seeing her pitiful act, Caleb's gaze softened instantly. Then he turned to me, his tone filled with cold contempt. "Arya, you brought this on yourself. Your mom got hit because she was faking an accident. You shouldn't have dragged Belle through endless lawsuits. She even had to pay to fix her car after your mom wrecked it. And she never asked you for a dime. That's called kindness. But you just kept pushing with a heart as rotten as yours. It's no wonder your mother died early." The words had barely left his mouth when a familiar voice cut through the crowd. "Who did you just say is dead?" my mother asked sharply, stepping out from the onlookers. My mother stopped a few feet away from Caleb, her spine straight, chin lifted, the same way she used to stand in front of nosy relatives at New Year's. The crowd parted for her without realizing they were doing it. Caleb's mouth fell open. "Mr. Morgan, who did you just say is dead?" my mother repeated, her voice clear and steady. "Because last I checked, I was shopping for scallions downstairs." The live streamers lowered their phones, confused murmurs rippling through the mob. Someone whispered, "Wait, so whose body was stolen?" Another muttered, "Did we get the wrong woman?" Caleb's gaze ping-ponged between my mother and me. He looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. For one long second, I watched understanding crawl up his throat and choke him. "Arya," he said hoarsely, if your mother is alive, then the body was your mother." I finished softly. Then I looked at the lenses still pointed at my face. "You're live, right? Keep streaming." A hush fell over the crowd. Even Belle, who had been clinging to Caleb's sleeve with an expertly tremulous lip, went still. "I filed 3 lawsuits," I said, facing the phones, the eyes, the world, because the woman who died at that intersection was my mother-in-law, Caleb's mother. She worked 2 jobs to put him through law school. She had the kindest hands. She made soup for our building storm. And when he caught the flu, she mailed care packages to kids at the shelter each winter. She was struck in a crosswalk by the driver you're protecting. I tipped my head toward Belle, who flinched. After the court called her a scammer, her body disappeared from the morgue. This afternoon, my husband told me he sold it on the black market for $2,000. I pointed at the cameras. "You all recorded him mocking my mother for being worth so little. Now you can record this. It wasn't my mother. It was his." For a heartbeat, the only sound was a pigeon fluttering off the railing. Then everything broke. A shout, "Play the clip back!" Another he confessed on camera, "Rewind." And somewhere on 10,000 screens at once, Caleb's earlier words replayed in crisp, damning audio. I already had her body sold on the black market and got $2,000 for it. "The dead don't feel pain. Stop bothering Belle." Belle went paper white. Caleb staggered back as though punched, groping for the wall. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not." He tried to lunge toward my mother. I stepped in front of her on instinct. "Don't, Arya. Let me explain." His voice cracked. I thought it was your—" "I know what you thought," I said. "You told me to my face. You told me with a smirk." The first egg hit the pavement near Caleb's shoe and burst, sulfur curling into the heat. But the frenzy wasn't for me anymore. Fingers pointed at him like arrows. Words harsher than anything hurled at me minutes ago tore through the air. "Monster, corpse seller, fraud. Take his license. Call the police. Step back," my mother said quietly behind me. "Let him see his truth." I moved aside. Caleb's eyes found the older woman's shopping bag, the simple sandals on her feet, the little flourish she always added to her scarf knot. The smallest sound escaped him. The sound a child makes when a dream snatches away a toy. He swallowed and straightened with visible effort, fixing on the one thing he always knew how to do: control the room. "Everyone, calm down," he said, raising his hands. "There's been a misunderstanding." I held up my phone. The red recording light winked back at me. "No, there hasn't." "Arya, please," Belle hissed, huddling into his side. "End the stream. This is a family matter. We can talk privately." "Delete the part where your boss ordered a human body sold like scrap metal." A woman from the crowd shot back. "Where you killed a pedestrian and cried your way out of charges." "I didn't," Belle's voice cracked. "Save it." Someone else snapped. "The traffic camera footage was public. You ran the light?" My chest felt paradoxically hollow and full. Grief and fury were twin tides in me, and I had ridden both for so long they felt like weather. But now there was something different in the air. The pressure dropped before a storm breaks the heat. I lowered my phone and spoke to Caleb, not the crowd. "You have 24 hours to tell the police where you sent your mother's body to. If a single part of her is missing, that's on your conscience. If you want to salvage one splinter of your soul, you'll get her back." Caleb's composure cracked. Fear flashed naked across his face. "You don't understand that world. he whispered. "Once she's in." He stopped, jaw clenching. The crowd erupted again, phones up like torches. "He admits it. He knows the brokers." "Where?" "Name them." He looked at me, then over my shoulder at my mother, and finally at Belle. She tried to catch his hand. He didn't take it. "I'll fix it," he said to me. An old reflexive promise rasped raw. "I'll bring her home." "You have 24 hours, I said again, and walked away. I spent that night at my mother's apartment, the one that always smelled faintly of oranges because she dried peels above the gas range. While she brewed tea, I sat at the little wooden table and compiled everything I had. Timestamps of calls, copies of pleadings, the morgue's chain of custody logs, the screenshot of Caleb's bank transfer to a new shell company, G and Armitage Donor Services made 2 hours after the body vanished. I drafted a statement and sent it to the police, to the state bar, to 3 investigative journalists, and to the city's medical examiner. At 2 a.m., the kettle clicked off and my mother slid a mug to my elbow. "Do you want me to stay up with you?" "I want to not be awake at 2, I said, voice rough, and then, because she was here and alive and the world was tilting back toward true north, my throat closed and I leaned into her shoulder like I hadn't in years. "He sold her," I whispered into the old lavender of her cardigan. "He really sold her." "He sold what he had already lost," my mother said, stroking my hair. "The son that woman loved grew into a man who loved only himself. That boy died before he touched law books." She kissed my temple. "But you're here, and your back is straight. That's what we have." I slept for 3 hours in the old yellow room with the creaking radiator. When my phone jolted me awake at dawn, the screen was a wildfire. Hundreds of notifications, dozens of messages, friends, strangers, reporters, a voicemail from a detective, another from a woman whose sister had disappeared 5 years ago, a third from a man who worked nights at the hospital, whispering about vans at the loading dock. At 6 a.m., Caleb called. I let it ring until the voicemail cut in. He called again. On the 4th ring, I answered. "Where?" I said without greeting. "I'm at the Riverport storage on 9th, he said, breathless. "Unit C10 don't bring anyone?" "I think I can't. I'm already with the police." I lied calmly, sliding into jeans and tying my hair back. "Stay where you are, Arya. Listen to me. These people... 24 hours, I said and hung up. By the time I reached Riverport storage, the alley was jammed with uniforms and unmarked cars. Detective Song, a woman with kind eyes and a narrow braid, met me at the tape. "We got your statement," she said, "and the clip. I've seen defense attorneys implode before, but not like that." She nodded toward the open bay. Inside Unit C10, stacked coolers glared under neon light. Every label was a gauntlet. Medical waste, surgical specimens, tissue samples. My stomach lurched. A tech with blue gloves checked seals and murmured numbers into a recorder. On the floor lay a crumpled contract, G and Armitage Donor Services, acceptance acknowledgement, 2,000, one whole adult female cadaver, unidentified. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until Song touched my elbow. "We found her," she said softly. "There are griefs so loud they shake pictures on walls. And there are griefs so quiet the world leans in hear them. Mine was the second kind. A small sound in my mother-in-law's kitchen where she had taught me to whisk eggs without splashing. I clapped a hand over my mouth and nodded, and then nodded again because I couldn't yet say thank you. Caleb stood outside the unit, flanked by 2 officers. He looked like a man walking without bones. For a moment, his gaze found mine. It slid away. The tendons in his jaw worked, a haunted, pointless grinding. "We're taking him in," Song said. "Obstruction of justice, abuse of a corpse. We'll see what else the DA adds." "And Belle?" I asked. "She's here," Song said without inflection, chin tilting toward a black Lexus idling down the row. "She refused to exit her vehicle until her lawyer arrived. Her lawyer is currently in cuffs." The back gate banged open. Reporters swarmed the alley. Microphones and questions flew. "Mrs. Morgan, did you know? Are you divorcing him? What do you say to families who never got their loved ones back? Do you blame Belle? Were you part of the scam?" I looked above the mess, past the roofs that made a low river of tar down 9th, and found a square of pale blue morning. I said, "A woman who worked her hands to the bone to raise a son deserves better than to be trafficked after death." I said clearly. "Courts that label victims as scammers because it's convenient will answer for it." And I said, grief should never have to scream to be believed. The funeral we planned for Mrs. Morgan a week later was small by intention. We invited no one who had turned a camera on me to call me garbage. We invited the doorman, the shelter director, 3 women from her church who cried into the casserole dish lids as if their hands couldn't hold the lids steady. We set her picture on the piano she had bought secondhand for Caleb after his first school recital, and the sunlight through the old glass made halos of dust around the frame. My mother came early, wearing the scarf Mrs. Morgan had knit her the year we married. After the service, she wrapped an arm around my waist and murmured, "You chose her as your mother-in-law. That was wise." I didn't feel wise. I felt scraped clean and new and ancient all at once, as if grief had sanded me to a different grain. But I nodded because sometimes wisdom was just staying when a better woman deserved a goodbye. Caleb was not there. He had been arraigned and released on bail with conditions. Surrender of passport, no contact with me, home confinement except for legal appointments. The state bar had suspended his license pending disciplinary proceedings. The DA had added charges, evidence tampering, conspiracy, harassment via fraud. He had not entered a plea. Belle vanished for 3 days, then resurfaced at a pop-up salon with new hair and a content creator's apology. I never intended to hurt anyone. Please respect my healing journey. The comments set themselves on fire. I watched all of it with a detached calm of someone who had already walked through the house after the flames and counted what the fire didn't take. What I had left, it turned out, was enough. I still had my job at the community legal clinic. My director, Rosa, had put me on paid leave the week of the raid and brought me back the Monday after the funeral with a hug that cracked my spine and a stack of intake files. "I told you we don't fire women for being married to fools," she said briskly. "You can start with the eviction cases, and if a single reporter bothers you here, I will feed them to the copy machine." My mother insisted I move into her spare room until the air in the apartment forgets him. I paid her half the rent and fixed the leaky bathroom tap and taught her to use a password manager. At night, when the city softened into far sirens and hallway voices, I wrote witness statements and practiced breathing. And I prepared for court. Caleb's attorney, appointed because his assets were frozen pending forfeit, filed a motion to suppress the live stream clip. Denied. He filed to dismiss the abuse of a corpse count. Denied. He filed to continue pending defense investigation. Denied. Somewhere under the motions, the man I had married sat in a suit a shade too large, looking like a version of himself left in the rain. 2 weeks before trial, he requested a meeting through our lawyers. I said no. He requested again. I said no. He sent a letter handwritten through Rosa because the conditions prevented direct contact. I left it sealed for 3 days on the kitchen table. On the 4th, my mother sat down a bowl of sliced mango and said, "Not reading a letter is still reading it with your spine." I opened it. "Arya, there is no apology sufficient. There are only facts. I can give you those. Gian Armitage is a front run by a man named Del Toro. He started recruiting in second-year contracts class when I was at school, offering stipends to anyone who could get bodies lost between hospitals and funeral homes. I never took his money then. I was the boy who couldn't afford not to be a saint. I took his money 10 years later. I could tell you why. The mortgage after the flooding, the flood insurance that never paid, the humiliation when my firm cut me out of partnership and made me write briefs for children half my age, Belle crying in the stairwell after her reprimand, my mother's constant calls asking if I was eating because I couldn't answer how cases were going. None of this matters. I still called Del Toro. I still asked for a broker's number. I still said, what would it cost? $2,000? It turned out $2,000 to ruin the last good thing about me. I will plead to whatever the DA will take. Please use the enclosed wiring info to set up a scholarship at the shelter in my mother's name. The money is clean. It's what I saved before I started to rot. I don't ask you to forgive me. I ask you to find air again. Signed, C. The note trembled in my hand. I set it down and ate the mango my mother had sliced bite by careful bite until the bowl was empty. Then I called Detective Song. "His letter mentions a name," I said. "Del Toro. I was about to call you," she said grimly. "We raided a warehouse by the docks this morning. Guess whose name is on 3 rental agreements? Gian Armitage fell in a day. It turned out that corruption doesn't rot in silence forever. It stinks. And if you follow the stink, you find the drain. The DA added racketeering charges for 6 men, One woman and a shell corporation with 4 bank accounts. Families who had been told for years that their loved ones would never be found received phone calls, visits, and in the lucky tragedies, remains. The morning Del Toro was arraigned, Belle posted a photo at a juice bar with the caption, "I choose light." Someone in the comments posted the clip of her screaming at a parking attendant 2 months earlier while brandishing a forged disability plaque. The internet, having learned a new shape for its outrage, pivoted. Her sponsor dumped her. The boutique where she bought her healing crystals banned her from the premises for the safety of the staff. She cried on live. 200,000 people watched and did not send money. I didn't watch. I had other work, which is why 3 weeks later, when the state bar scheduled Caleb's disciplinary hearing and the DA set a change of plea hearing for the criminal case on the same day, I marked both in my planner and bought my mother a bouquet of the tiny white lilies she liked. "You don't have to go," she said, trimming the stems over the sink. "You don't have to watch him kneel." "I think I do," I said. "Not for him, for me, for her." At the bar hearing, the panel's questions were surgical. "Mr. Morgan, did you knowingly mislead the court about the victim's identity? Mr. Morgan, did you contact a morgue employee to facilitate a release to a third party? Mr. Morgan, did you instruct your client, Miss Carter, to reconstruct her traffic narrative to minimize fault?" Caleb answered yes to each. The last yes made something behind his eyes crumple. They disbarred him before lunch. At the criminal hearing that afternoon, he stood to enter his plea. The courtroom was mostly empty. A reporter in the back. Detective Song. Belle wasn't there. She had been charged separately with vehicular homicide and had petitioned to move to another state for a fresh start. The judge denied the motion. "How do you plead, Mr. Morgan?" the judge asked. "Guilty," he said, his voice clear for the first time in months. He didn't look at me. The judge set the verdict for 30 days and remanded him. When the deputies moved to cuff him, he lifted his hands as if he had been practicing the motion alone in a room. As we filed out, Song touched my forearm. "You did more than bury a man," she said quietly. "You unearthed a system." "I didn't do it alone," I said. "You dug with me." She smiled. "We'll get you on a billboard. Come on, coffee, my treat." I almost said yes. Then my phone buzzed. The text was from an unknown number. "Miss Lane, this is Judge Weathers' clerk. The court has reviewed the transcripts from your prior civil actions, including the traffic footage, your affidavit, and Mr. Morgan's recorded admissions. His Honor is granting your motion to vacate the judgments with prejudice and approving your petition for damages to Mrs. Carter's estate. Please see the attached order." In the hallway, the fluorescent lights blurred for a second. I blinked them back into focus and opened the PDF. The order was real. It was signed. The number at the bottom, compensatory damages, punitive damages, attorney's fees, was not the point, but it would buy a 100 beds at the shelter for a year. I forwarded the order to Rosa with the note for her name on the wall. Then I texted my mother, "Dinner's on me." He called once from county after the sentencing. I didn't answer. I listened to the voicemail that night with my elbows on my knees and the lights off. "Arya," he said, voice flattened by the recording line. "I meant what I wrote. I don't forgive myself. I don't expect you to. I hope when I get out, I can put chairs away after meetings in basement and hand coffee to men who need it. That could be a life. Tell my mother." He stopped, breath clattering. "No, you tell her what you want. She belongs to you now more than she ever did to me." I deleted it. Then, after a minute, I went to the recently deleted folder and restored it. I would not build a new life out of pretending the old one hadn't existed. Belle went to trial 4 months later. She cried on the stand. She wore the soft gray of the repentant. Her lawyer argued the camera had malfunctioned, that the light appeared red due to sun glare, that she had been harassed by a vindictive wife and maliciously prosecuted by a scorned former colleague. The jury needed 2 hours to find her guilty, 3 years probation, afterwards suspension of license. The judge looked at her over the rim of her glasses and said, "I suggest you learn to walk." Outside the courthouse, a reporter caught me on the steps. "Miss Lane, any comment?" "Yes," I said. "There's a woman in our city who needs rent help this month because her abusive landlord thinks that eviction is a personality trait. Don't put my face on the news. Put hers and put the shelter's donation link under it." The segment that night showed a blurred picture of the woman and a clear link. Donations crashed the site twice. If there is a shape to healing, mine was built of small tasks. I filed forms. I walked around the block with my mother after dinner. I learned the names of every kid at the shelter on Wednesdays. I took the piano bench out of our former living room and left the piano. The bench fit in my mother's place. It held a plant and my keys. The piano held silence in the empty apartment until the landlord found a music teacher who wanted it for a community choir. He sent me a photo of it in a school gym. Girls in uniforms singing with their mouths wide like sunlight. I signed the final divorce papers 6 months after the sentencing. My lawyer slid the decree across the table. "You're free," she said softly, "if that word applies to any of us." "It applies," I said, and it did. Not as fireworks, not as a shout. It applied like waking and knowing which way the window faced without opening your eyes. That night, after my mother fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote the last letter of that chapter of my life. I wrote it to Mrs. Morgan. "Dear Mom, I picked a pie up from Marbles on 7th today. Peach, because you said peach is the color of summer when it gets shy. I put 2 plates out and my mother insisted we cut generous. She told a story about how you scolded her for giving me a second helping one night because this girl has to wear her war on the inside, not on her zip. We laughed, we cried, we did both at once. We won the case in your name. The money will build a room for women who need a door that closes and locks. Your name will be on that door. Kids will say it like a password. I kept one scarf, the blue one. I learned to tie it with a flourish you used to show me before church when I could never get the ends even. I think I finally did it right. I have no assurance to offer about your son. He is a man walking into a long night with his hands out, but he is walking. That has to count for something you can see from where you are. I will not forget the soup recipe or the way you held a ladle like a gavel when you were about to forgive someone. I hope you are where forgiveness tastes like cinnamon. Thank you for the piano bench. It holds memories now, and my keys, and sometimes my spine when I am very tired. Love, Arya." I folded the letter and tucked it into the cookbook she had given me our first Christmas. It fit there as if the book had been waiting for it. The following spring, on a Tuesday so ordinary the sky looked tired of being blue, Rosa burst into my cubicle with 2 coffees and said, "Put on a blazer. You're going to the Capitol." "What? You're testifying?" She grinned. Assembly Bill 441, the one that closes the body broker loopholes and mandates cross-checks between morgues and medical facilities. They want a face to the words. You're the face, I don't. The old panic, the kind that smells like live stream spittle and rotten eggs, scratched at my throat. "I don't do well with microphones." "You do fine with truth," she said, thrusting the cup at me. "And microphones are just truth with a spine." 2 hours later, I sat behind a little plaque that said, "Miss Arya Lane, Community Legal Services," and told a room of suits about a woman who had made soup and loved a boy, and about a boy who grew into a man who forgot his own name until it cost him everything, and about a wife who learned to stop making herself smaller so the law could fit in a box. A senator with silver hair asked me, "Miss Lane, what do you say to those who argue this bill will add burdens to already stressed systems?" I thought of cold units under neon, of contracts printed on cheap paper, of a mother's hands. "I say the burden is already being carried," I answered. "It's being carried by the dead and the people who love them." "Move it." They passed the bill out of committee that afternoon. When I got home, my mother was dicing onions. "Well?" she asked without turning. I said, "Microphones are truth with a spine." I replied, washing my hands. She snorted. "That Rosa, she puts her slogans in the lunch." "We got an initial vote," I added. "It's moving." "Good," my mother said. "Then eat. The rice is perfect." We ate after dinner. I walked down to the shelter to help with intake. A woman with a purple backpack and a scar like a question mark on her cheek sat across from me. Her name is Jada. She kept touching the strap as if a hand might rise from inside the pack and hold her steady. "Do you have a safe contact?" I asked. "My aunt," she said. "She lives 2 states over. She likes crossword puzzles." "That's a good-on trait," I said and smiled. She smiled back. On my way out, I stopped in the new room with the new door. The plaque was screwed into the wall at a little tilt. I straightened it with my fingers. It read, "The Margaret Morgan Room for Rest, for dignity, for the hands that raised us." I stood there until my eyes cleared. The last time I saw Caleb was 2 years later. The city had given us a new park, and I went on Tuesday mornings to sit on a bench with coffee and write notes for hearings. That day, a man in a gray maintenance shirt was sweeping the path near the shallow fountain. He moved carefully, as if the air were fragile. When he straightened, he turned and saw me. There was a pause, the kind that holds 2 years. "Arya," he said. "Caleb." We stood on either side of the bench like actors who had forgotten their blocking. He had lost the lawyer's air and kept the skull. He held the broom as if it taught him how to stand. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm good," I said, because I was. "The clinic is busy." He nodded. "I mop the floors at night in the hospital where you used to file motions." "That's honest work," I said. "It pays," he quietly answered. After a second, he asked, "Do you still have the piano?" "The choir does," I said. "They love it." "Good," he murmured. "She would like that." We looked at the fountain. A child in a red hat tossed in a coin with grave ceremony. His mother applauded as if he had just won a case. "I wanted to say," he started. "You don't need to," I said, not unkindly. We both know the words. We also know what they can't fix. He closed his eyes, opened them. "You were always better with the right sentence." "You were too," I said. "Once." He half smiled, then looked at my left hand. I wore no ring. I wore a scar on my knuckle from a box cutter and ink from a leaky pen. "Are you?" he began. "I am," I said, and didn't elaborate. I had learned that the only story I owed him was the one already written. He nodded, set the broom against the bench, and offered his palm. Oh, I took it. His grip was firm and brief. When he let go, he picked up the broom like a man who had learned the simple luxury of doing one thing right at a time. "Take care, Arya," he said. "You too," I replied. He walked away. The coin in the fountain winked. A bus hissed. The day which had begun with coffee continued into errands, and then into evening, and then into sleep without nightmares. If this were a different book, perhaps I would have met someone by then under a library arch and fallen in love like rain. Perhaps I would have left the city and bought a bakery with a striped awarded and learned to make dough behave. Perhaps forgiveness would have swept in on a grand prelude and wept us all clean. Instead, the life I chose was steadier and stranger and far more mine. I learned to garden in plastic tubs on the fire escape. I bought running shoes and used them. I helped write a statute that bore my fingerprints so faintly no one but me could recognize the world's. I said my mother's names into rooms that had never heard them and watched those rooms change shape. On the 2nd anniversary of the verdict, I visited the shelter early. The staff had put up string lights that made the hallway feel like a soft idea of a carnival. In the Margaret Morgan room, a teenager with a gold hoop in her ear was painting her nails pale blue while a toddler slept on her lap. "Sorry," she whispered when she saw me in the doorway. "He just conked out." "This is a good place to conk out," I whispered back and pointed to the plaque. "Do you know what that says?" She squinted, reading each word carefully, lips moving. "For rest, for dignity, for the hands that raised us," she murmured. "That's nice." "It is," I said. "It belonged to a woman I loved." "Then she raised you right?" the girl said, and looked back down at her nails, concentration furrowed. The toddler sighed, a small ship settling on its moor. On my way home, the sky did a quiet, ordinary miracle and turned very blue. I passed a street violinist near the pharmacy. Too many flats. But a brave bow and dropped my last dollar into his case. He smiled without breaking the phrase. At the corner, I stopped and looked up. My mother in her window held up a bowl like a trophy. "Oranges." She wiggled it at me until I laughed. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time. In the kitchen, she pressed a slice into my mouth before I had my shoes off. "Sweet," she demanded. "Sweet," I agreed around the juice. She nodded satisfied and turned back to the stove. "We are out of soy sauce," she decreed. "After dinner, you will go and buy some." "Yes, boss," I said, and kissed the back of her head. I set the table. I drew the blinds. I lit the little tea light in the chipped holder with the painted pears. Outside, the city coughed and breathed and argued and sang. Inside, we ate. When we were done, I looked at the piano bench by the door where I left my keys. For a long time, that bench had been a memory of a promise someone else broke. Now it was just a place to rest before going out again. I slipped on my shoes and picked up the empty bottle. On my way downstairs, I patted my pockets for change and found none. It didn't matter. I knew the man at the bodega would tell me to pay tomorrow. In this life, some debts you carry as a courtesy to kindness. Others you sat down because they were never yours. At the threshold, I paused and glanced back. My mother had already started washing dishes, humming something that might have been a hymn and might have been a pop song. The lamp near the couch warmed the room into the color of custard. It looked like a painting of an ending that had decided to be a beginning. I went out into the night and bought soy sauce. On the way home, I passed the fountain. Coins flashed like little moons. I made a wish without closing my eyes that grief would find softer shoes, that justice would stop confusing volume with merit, that the hands that raised us would be held, living or dead. Then I walked upstairs to the door with our names on it and went in. And the orange scent met me, and the future, patient and bright, took off its coat and stayed.